The bullet tore through the still desert air, striking the dust mere inches from Finn Wayland's worn leather boots. The sound echoed across the canyon walls, sending startled birds skyward as he dropped to one knee, his hand instinctively reaching for his Colt revolver. The year was 1878, and out here in the Arizona Territory, a man's past had a way of finding him no matter how far he ran. "That was a warning," called a voice from the ridge above. "Next one goes between your eyes, Wayland." Finn squinted against the harsh sunlight, making out 3 silhouettes on horseback against the cloudless sky. He recognized the voice Jeb Harkins, one of the McAllister gang. They'd finally caught up to him. "You boys rode an awful long way just to miss," Finn called back, his voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. "Didn't miss. Just wanted to see the look on your face first," Jeb shouted. "McAllister says hello, says you've been carrying something that belongs to him." Finn's hand tightened around his revolver. The weight of it was familiar, like the weight of everything else he carried: guilt, regret, memories that wouldn't fade no matter how many miles he put behind him. "Tell McAllister I'm done running his errands," Finn replied, edging toward the cover of a nearby boulder. "That business in Santa Fe is finished." "Not by half," came the reply. "You've got 1 day to bring what you took, or we burn that little town you've been hiding in to the ground. Starting with that boarding house you're so fond of." Cold fear gripped Finn's spine. They knew about Promise Creek, about Mrs. Fulton's boarding house, about the people who'd taken him in, not knowing what kind of man they were harboring. Before he could respond, the riders wheeled their horses around and disappeared behind the ridge. Finn holstered his weapon and rose slowly, brushing the red desert dust from his trousers. His mare, Penny, nickered softly from where she was tethered to a scrub oak, seemingly untroubled by the confrontation. "They found us, girl," he murmured, stroking her russet mane as he untied the reins. "Means we've got to move on. Again." As he swung into the saddle, Finn gazed eastward toward Promise Creek. It had been the closest thing to home he'd known in 3 years. 6 months of honest work at the livery stable, a small room at the widow Fulton's boarding house, and people who nodded at him on the street without suspicion in their eyes. And there was Abigail. Abigail Harding with her auburn hair and knowing smile. The schoolteacher who somehow saw beyond his silences to something he thought he'd buried along with his real name. She believed he was a good man. That was the most dangerous thing of all. Finn turned Penny toward Promise Creek, knowing what he had to do. Pack his few belongings, leave enough money to cover any trouble he might have brought to their doorstep, and vanish before McAllister's men made good on their threat. It was a familiar routine by now, the only safe path for a man with his history. The ride back to town took nearly 2 hours, the sun beating down mercilessly on his shoulders. By the time the modest wood and brick buildings of Promise Creek came into view, late afternoon shadows were stretching across the main street. The town wasn't much: a general store, a small bank, 2 saloons, a church, the schoolhouse, and assorted businesses that served the surrounding ranches and homesteads. But it was clean and orderly, the kind of place where people believed in second chances. Until today, Finn had almost believed in them too. He led Penny to the livery stable where he worked, nodding to old Mr. Peterson, who sat whittling on a stool by the entrance. "Didn't expect you back so early," the old man said, his weathered face crinkling with curiosity. "Thought you were checking fence lines for the Robertson spread all day." "Change of plans," Finn replied, dismounting and leading Penny to her stall. "Need to talk to you about something, Mr. Peterson." The old stable master raised his bushy eyebrows. "Sound serious, son." Finn removed Penny's saddle, taking more time with the task than necessary. I'm afraid I need to move on, tonight if possible. Peterson set down his knife and the piece of pine he'd been carving. That's mighty sudden. Trouble? Nothing I want bringing to your doorstep, Finn admitted, meeting the older man's gaze directly. You've been good to me. This whole town has. Peterson stroked his gray beard. This have anything to do with those riders that came through this morning? Looking for you they were. Said they were old friends. Finn's hand froze on Penny's bridle. When? Just after breakfast. 3 rough-looking fellas. Asked all about you, how long you'd been here, where you lived. Peterson frowned. I didn't much care for their manner, so I wasn't particularly forthcoming. But Promise Creek ain't big enough to hide a man for long. No, Finn agreed grimly. It's not. You running from the law, son? Finn shook his head. Something worse. Peterson nodded slowly. Well, I won't pry, just know that running ain't always the answer. Sometimes a man's got to stand his ground. Not when innocent people could get hurt, Finn replied, finishing with Penny and giving her a final pat on the neck. I appreciate everything, Mr. Peterson. I'll settle up what I owe you before I go. You don't owe me anything except the truth someday when you're ready to tell it, the old man said, rising from his stool. Your wages for the week are in the strong box. Take what's yours. With a grateful nod, Finn collected his pay and stepped back onto the main street. The late afternoon bustle continued around him, mothers collecting children from the schoolhouse, men heading to the saloon after a day's work, wagons making deliveries. Normal life. The kind that had never quite belonged to him. His gaze drifted to the white clapboard schoolhouse where a slender figure in a blue dress was locking the front door. Abigail. She turned as if sensing his scrutiny and raised a hand in greeting, her smile visible even at this distance. Without thinking, Finn found himself walking toward her. Mr. Wayland, she said as he approached, her hazel eyes warm with welcome. You're a sight for sore eyes. These children have worn me to the bone today. Miss Harding, he replied, removing his hat. The sun caught in her auburn hair, turning it to fire. Apologies for interrupting your day. Nonsense. I was just heading to the mercantile before returning to my father's house. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Would you care to walk with me? Finn hesitated. Every moment spent in Promise Creek now was dangerous for him, for her, for everyone. But he found himself nodding. I'd be honored. They walked side by side down the boardwalk, nodding to townspeople as they passed. Finn was acutely aware of Abigail's presence beside him, the faint scent of lavender that always seemed to surround her, the graceful way she carried herself. You seem troubled today, Mr. Wayland, she observed after they'd walked in silence for a minute. More so than usual, if I may be so bold. Despite everything, Finn felt the corner of his mouth lift, and here I thought I was an open book. Hardly, she replied with a soft laugh. You're the most private man I've ever met, but I've come to recognize certain signs. The way your brow furrows when something's weighing on you. Just tired, he lied, holding the mercantile door open for her. Long day. Inside, the store was busy with late-day shoppers. Mr. Calloway nodded to them from behind the counter where he was measuring out flour for Mrs. Jensen. Abigail moved toward the section with paper goods and school supplies, and Finn followed, his eyes constantly scanning the store for unfamiliar faces. I've been meaning to ask you something, Abigail said as she examined a packet of writing chalk. The town social is this Saturday evening, and I find myself without an escort. I wondered if perhaps you might consider accompanying me. Finn felt a pang in his chest. By Saturday, he would be long gone, putting as many miles as possible between McAllister's men and Promise Creek. I'm afraid I can't, Miss Harding, he said quietly. She looked up, disappointment clear in her eyes. Oh, well, I understand. It was merely a thought. It's not that I wouldn't want to, Finn added hastily. It's just that the mercantile door swung open with a bang and Finn's words died in his throat. 3 men entered, their spurs jangling against the wooden floor. The same 3 silhouettes from the ridge. They spotted him immediately. "Well, if it ain't our old friend," Jeb called out, his voice cutting through the quiet murmur of the store. "Told you boys we'd find him." Finn stepped forward, positioning himself between the men and Abigail. "This isn't the place, Jeb." Jeb's weather-beaten face split in an ugly grin. "Oh, I think it's exactly the place, public enough that you won't try anything stupid." His eyes shifted to Abigail. "Who's the pretty lady? She know what kind of man she's standing next to. Leave her out of this," Finn said, his voice low and dangerous. "Mr. Wayland." Abigail's voice came from behind him, confused and wary. "Please go, Miss Harding," Finn said without taking his eyes off the 3 men. "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it might," Jeb drawled. "Seems our friend Wayland here, if that's what he's calling himself these days, has a habit of bringing trouble to nice, unsuspecting folks." The store had gone silent, customers pressing themselves against shelves, trying to become invisible. Mr. Calloway had reached below his counter, no doubt for the shotgun Finn knew he kept there. "You said I had a day," Finn reminded them. "I'm still considering your offer." "McAllister got impatient," Jeb replied with a shrug. "Said to bring you back, willing or not, the choice is yours." Finn felt the weight of his revolver against his hip, knew he could draw it before any of them could react. But not without risking everyone in the store, not without confirming everything these men were saying about him to Abigail and the rest of Promise Creek. "I'll go with you," he said finally. "But not today. Tomorrow morning, I'll meet you at the edge of town at sunrise." Jeb exchanged glances with his companions. "And why would we trust you to show up?" "Because I give you my word," Finn replied steadily. "And because you know I won't risk these people getting hurt." Jeb considered this, then nodded slowly. "First light, just you and what belongs to McAllister, any sign of the law or if you're not there." His eyes roamed meaningfully around the store, lingering on Abigail. "Well, we've already told you what happens then." "I understand," Finn said. With a final smirk, Jeb and his men backed out of the store, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Gradually, whispers started, and people began to edge toward the door, suddenly eager to be elsewhere. Finn turned to face Abigail, dreading what he would see in her expression. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with questions. "Mr. Wayland," she began. "Who were those men?" "People from my past," he answered honestly. "People I hope never to see again. And what they said about you bringing trouble." She hesitated. "Is that true?" Finn looked around at the frightened faces of the townspeople, some watching him with newfound suspicion, others already hurrying out the door to spread what they'd witnessed. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm afraid it is." Before she could respond, he placed his hat back on his head and strode from the store, aware of the stares that followed him. The afternoon sun was sinking low now, casting long shadows down the main street. Finn headed directly for Mrs. Fulton's boarding house, knowing he had precious little time to gather his things and leave before nightfall. The boarding house was a 2-story white building with green shutters, a wide front porch, and a reputation for the best stew in the territory. Mrs. Fulton, a widow of some 20 years, ran it with firm efficiency and genuine warmth. She was sweeping the porch when Finn approached. "There you are," she said cheerfully. "I was beginning to think you'd miss supper. I've made your favorite venison stew with those dumplings you like so much." The kindness in her voice made his decision even more painful. "That's mighty thoughtful, Mrs. Fulton, but I'm afraid I won't be staying for supper, or anything else." She leaned on her broom, studying his face. "I've already heard about the commotion at the mercantile." News travels fast in Promise Creek. Then you understand why I need to leave, Finn replied. Those men will be back, and I don't want them anywhere near you or your establishment. Mrs. Fulton resumed her sweeping. And when exactly were you planning to go? Now, tonight. As soon as I can gather my things and settle my account with you. She stopped sweeping again and fixed him with a stern gaze that reminded him she'd raised 4 boys of her own. Running away isn't going to solve whatever trouble you're in, young man. With all due respect, Mrs. Fulton, staying will only make it worse. She considered this, then sighed. At least have some supper before you go. I won't have it said that a man left my house hungry, no matter what kind of trouble's on his heels. Despite everything, Finn felt a surge of gratitude for this stern but caring woman. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Inside, the boarding house was quiet, most of the other residents still at their day's business. Finn climbed the stairs to his small room at the end of the hallway and closed the door behind him. It didn't take long to pack. He'd never accumulated much. A spare shirt, an extra pair of trousers, a few personal items that could fit in his saddlebags. From beneath the loose floorboard under his bed, he retrieved a small leather pouch. Inside was what McAllister wanted: a silver pocket watch inlaid with turquoise, and a folded piece of paper with a series of numbers written in a careful hand. The combination to the safe that contained the deed to McAllister's silver mine, a deed that legally belonged to someone else. Finn had been trusted to deliver both items after the bloody business in Santa Fe, but something had stopped him. Perhaps the look in the eyes of the man McAllister had ordered him to kill. Or perhaps it was simply that 3 years of riding with the gang had finally shown him what kind of monster he was working for. Whatever the reason, he'd taken the watch and the combination and disappeared. Not to steal them for himself, but to keep them from McAllister. It had been a foolish, impulsive act of conscience from a man who'd ignored his conscience for too long. And now, people he cared about might pay the price. A soft knock at his door startled him from his thoughts. He quickly tucked the pouch into his jacket pocket before opening it. Abigail Harding stood in the hallway, her expression determined despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "Miss Harding," Finn said, genuinely surprised. "How did you Mrs. Peterson at the general store told me you boarded here," she explained. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." Finn hesitated. Having her in his room wasn't proper, but nothing about this situation was. He stepped aside, allowing her to enter, but left the door slightly ajar for the sake of her reputation. Abigail glanced around the sparse room, taking in his packed belongings. "So it's true, you're leaving." "I don't have a choice," he replied. "Everyone has choices, Mr. Wayland, even you." She turned to face him directly. "Those men, who are they really?" Finn sank onto the edge of his bed, suddenly tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "They work for a man named Darius McAllister. He ran a gang I used to ride with, before Promise Creek." To her credit, Abigail didn't flinch at this admission. "And what did you do with this gang?" "Nothing I'm proud of," he answered truthfully. "Robbery mostly, some protection schemes. Convincing people it was in their best interest to sell their property to McAllister for a fraction of what it was worth." "Were you a killer, Mr. Wayland?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "No, not until the end. McAllister wanted me to be, but I couldn't." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "What happened in Santa Fe?" she asked quietly, showing she'd been paying attention at the mercantile. Finn looked up at her, this schoolteacher who somehow wasn't running for the door despite what he was telling her. McAllister wanted a silver mine that belonged to a man named Ellis. When Ellis refused to sell, McAllister decided to take it by force. "He sent me to handle it, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't kill a man whose only crime was refusing to be bullied, so I took something McAllister needed and ran. And now they've found you. Yes, and they'll hurt anyone in Promise Creek who gets in their way. I've seen what they can do. Abigail moved to sit beside him on the bed, her skirts rustling against the rough wool blanket. So you're planning to meet them tomorrow and give them what they want? I'm planning to be long gone by tomorrow, Finn corrected her. As far from Promise Creek as I can get, I'll lead them away from here. And they'll follow you and eventually catch you, and then what? She challenged. How does this end, Mr. Wayland? The question hung in the air between them. Finn had asked himself the same thing countless times over the past 3 years, and he still didn't have an answer. I don't know, he admitted, but at least the people here will be safe. Abigail shook her head, a strand of auburn hair falling across her face. There's another way. Go to Sheriff Dawson. Tell him everything you've told me. Let the law handle McAllister and his men. The law can't protect everyone, Finn argued. And I'm a wanted man myself, Miss Harding. I'd be trading one cell for another. At least you'd be alive, and you'd be doing the right thing. She reached for his hand, her touch warm against his skin. The man I've come to know over these past months, the man who helps Mr. Ellis with his reading lessons, who fixed the schoolhouse roof when it leaked, who carries Mrs. Fulton's heavy groceries without being asked, that man deserves a chance at redemption. Finn looked down at their joined hands. I've done things, Abigail, things I can't take back. We all carry regrets, she said softly. But we don't have to carry them alone, and we don't have to let them define our future. A call from downstairs interrupted the moment. Supper's ready, Mrs. Fulton's voice echoed up the stairwell. I should go, Abigail said, rising from the bed. But please consider what I've said. Promise Creek could use a man like you, not just passing through, but staying, building something. She moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. And for what it's worth, I would have been proud to attend the social with you on Saturday. With that, she was gone, leaving Finn alone with thoughts more tumultuous than before. He sat motionless for several minutes, turning her words over in his mind, weighing them against everything he knew about McAllister and his own chances. Finally, he stood, collected his packed belongings, and headed downstairs for what might be his last meal in Promise Creek. The dining room was surprisingly full. Mrs. Fulton's other boarders, Mr. Phillips, the bank clerk, the widow Johnson, and the Hendricks brothers who worked at the sawmill were all seated around the long oak table. They looked up as Finn entered, their expressions guarded. There he is, Mrs. Fulton said, setting a steaming bowl of stew at his usual place. Sit down before it gets cold. Finn complied, aware of the sidelong glances from the others. News had clearly spread throughout the small town. He ate in silence as conversation gradually resumed around him, focusing on his food rather than the whispered speculations he could hear at the other end of the table. When the meal was finished, he approached Mrs. Fulton in the kitchen where she was washing dishes. I want to thank you for everything, he said, placing a small stack of coins on the counter. This should cover my board and a bit extra for any trouble. Mrs. Fulton dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him. I won't take your money, Mr. Wayland. Please, he insisted. I need to know I've settled my debts before I go. Is that what you think this is? A debt? She shook her head. When you came to Promise Creek, you were half-starved and looking like you hadn't slept indoors for months. I took you in because you needed help, not because I expected to profit from it. All the more reason I should pay what I owe. Mrs. Fulton pushed the coins back toward him. If you want to settle accounts, then do it by making better choices than running away. This town has come to depend on you whether you realize it or not. Mr. Peterson says you're the best horse trainer he's had in years. The children at the school look up to you. And Miss Harding, she smiled knowingly. Well, a blind man could see how she feels about you. Finn felt a tightness in his throat. Those men who came today, they're dangerous. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who stands in their way. Perhaps, but Promise Creek isn't as defenseless as you might think. She patted his hand. Sleep on it. Things often look clearer in the morning light. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the main street illuminated only by the glow from windows and the occasional lantern. Finn stood on the boarding house porch, his packed belongings at his feet, feeling the cool night air against his face. The sensible thing, the thing he'd planned, was to retrieve Penny from the livery stable and ride out now, using the cover of night to put distance between himself and Promise Creek. Instead, he found himself walking toward the small sheriff's office at the end of the street. Sheriff Tom Dawson was a former Texas Ranger who'd settled in Promise Creek after taking a bullet in his leg that left him with a permanent limp. He was fair, methodical, and not easily intimidated, qualities that had kept the small town relatively peaceful despite the lawlessness that plagued much of the territory. The office was still lit when Finn arrived. He paused at the door, his hand raised to knock, doubt suddenly overwhelming him. Was he really prepared to face the consequences of his past? To potentially spend years behind bars for the crimes he'd committed with McAllister's gang? Abigail's words echoed in his mind. You don't have to let your regrets define your future. Before he could change his mind, Finn knocked firmly on the door. "Come in," called a gruff voice from inside. The sheriff's office was small but orderly, a desk, a few chairs, a gun rack, and 2 cells at the back, both currently empty. Sheriff Dawson looked up from his paperwork, surprise registering on his weathered face when he saw who his visitor was. "Wayland," he said, setting down his pen. "Heard there was some excitement involving you at Calloway's store today." "That's why I'm here," Finn replied, removing his hat. "I need to talk to you, Sheriff, about those men and about myself." Dawson gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, then. Something tells me this isn't going to be a short conversation." For the next hour, Finn talked. He told the sheriff everything about joining McAllister's gang as a young man fresh from his family's failed farm, about the robberies and intimidation, about Santa Fe and his decision to take the watch and the combination, about his 3 years on the run that had eventually led him to Promise Creek. The sheriff listened without interruption, his expression giving away nothing. When Finn finally fell silent, Dawson leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath his weight. "That's quite a story," he said at last, "and I'm guessing you can prove it." Finn reached into his pocket and withdrew the leather pouch, placing it on the desk. "The watch and the combination McAllister wants. The deed is in a safe in Santa Fe at an attorney's office named Prescott. McAllister killed the rightful owner to get it, but he needs this combination to access it." Dawson opened the pouch, examining the contents. "And you're telling me you've had this all this time, never tried to use it yourself?" "I never wanted the mine," Finn explained. "I just couldn't let McAllister have it, not after what he did to get it." The sheriff replaced the items in the pouch. "You realize, of course, that you're confessing to being part of a criminal gang. That makes you wanted by the law, I know. And you know I'll have to arrest you." Finn nodded. "I understand. But before you do, I need to know that Promise Creek will be protected from McAllister's men. They're expecting me at dawn, and they won't take kindly to being disappointed." Dawson stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "How many men does McAllister typically send for a job like this?" 3, like today. Maybe 4. He doesn't like to draw attention with large groups. And these 3, they're the same ones who confronted you earlier. Finn confirmed they were, describing Jeb and the others in detail. "Well then," Dawson said, rising from his desk. I think it's time we had a town meeting. An hour later, the church was filled with the citizens of Promise Creek. Men, women, and even some older children packed the pews, their faces a mixture of concern, curiosity, and in some cases, outright fear. Sheriff Dawson stood at the pulpit, Finn beside him, as he explained the situation facing their town. These men are dangerous, Dawson concluded, but they're expecting to face one man tomorrow, not an entire town prepared to defend itself. Murmurs spread through the congregation. Mr. Peterson was the first to stand. I've got 2 shotguns and know how to use them both, the old stable master declared. The Hendricks brothers and I can cover the south approach to town, offered Mr. Reynolds, the blacksmith. One by one, the men of Promise Creek volunteered, forming a plan for the morning's confrontation. The women discussed taking the children to the widow Johnson's farm outside town, safely away from any potential violence. Throughout it all, Finn stood silent, overwhelmed by the response. These people barely knew him, had just learned he was a former outlaw, and yet they were rallying to protect not just their town, but him as well. As the meeting broke up, Abigail approached him, her father the town's doctor at her side. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I hope so," Finn replied. "I never wanted to bring this to your doorstep." Dr. Harding extended his hand. "My daughter speaks highly of you, Mr. Wayland, says you're a man of character despite your past. I'm inclined to believe her judgment." Finn shook the offered hand, grateful for the unexpected support. "Thank you, sir. Your daughter has shown me more kindness than I deserve." "Kindness isn't about deserving," Abigail said. "It's about seeing the person someone can become, not just who they've been." As the church emptied, Sheriff Dawson approached them. "It's getting late, and tomorrow we'll come early. Dr. Harding, I trust you and Miss Harding will be heading to the widow Johnson's farm with the other women and children." Before the doctor could answer, Abigail spoke up. "I'll be going to the farm to help with the children, but I'll return once they're settled. I'm a fair shot with a rifle, Sheriff, as you well know from the turkey shoot last Thanksgiving." "Abigail," her father protested, "this isn't a game. These men are killers." "All the more reason to have every capable person defending our town," she replied firmly. "I won't cower while others risk themselves." Finn wanted to object as well, to insist that she stay far from danger, but the determined set of her jaw told him it would be futile. This was the same strength he'd admired in her from the beginning, the unwavering conviction that drove her to teach children others had given up on, to stand up for what she believed was right. "Very well," Sheriff Dawson conceded. "But you'll follow orders, Miss Harding, and stay where I position you." "Of course, Sheriff," she agreed. As they left the church, Finn found himself walking beside Abigail in the cool night air. Her father had gone ahead to prepare supplies for the morning, leaving them a moment of privacy. "You should be leaving with the others," Finn said quietly. "This isn't your fight." "Promise Creek is my home," she replied. "That makes it my fight." She paused, turning to face him. "And you're part of this town now, whether you intended to be or not. That makes you worth fighting for too." Her words struck him deeply, cutting through the layers of guilt and self-recrimination he'd wrapped around himself for years. "I don't know what will happen tomorrow," he said, "or after when the law comes for me." "Neither do I," she admitted. "But I know that facing it is better than running from it. And whatever comes, you won't face it alone anymore." She reached up and gently touched his cheek, the gesture so unexpected and tender that Finn felt something within him break and begin to heal all at once. "Good night, Mr. Wayland," she said softly, then turned and continued down the street toward her father's house. Finn watched her go, a jumble of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't planning his escape route or calculating how far he could get by dawn. Instead, he was thinking about what it might mean to stay, to face the consequences of his actions, to build something lasting. It was terrifying, and somehow also liberating. Dawn broke clear and cold over Promise Creek. Finn stood at the edge of town beside Sheriff Dawson, watching the eastern horizon turn from gray to pink to gold. They'd chosen the North Road for the confrontation, an open stretch with good visibility and minimal risk to the town's buildings. Around them, the men of Promise Creek had taken up positions behind wagons, water troughs, and hastily constructed barricades. Most were armed with rifles or shotguns, though a few had only pistols. They weren't professional gunmen, but they were defending their homes, which made them formidable in their own way. "They're late," Dawson observed, checking his pocket watch. The sun had cleared the horizon by a good margin. "You sure they said dawn?" "First light," Finn confirmed, a growing uneasiness in his stomach. "They should have been here by now." A shout from behind them made both men turn. Mr. Phillips was running toward them from the direction of town, his face pale with urgency. "Sheriff, they're at the school." 3 riders just broke into the schoolhouse. Finn's blood ran cold. The schoolhouse. Why would they? Then realization struck him like a physical blow. "Abigail, they must have seen her with me yesterday. They're looking for leverage." Without waiting for the sheriff's response, Finn was running, his long legs carrying him swiftly back toward the center of town. Behind him, he could hear Dawson shouting orders, rallying men to follow. The schoolhouse was a single-room building at the eastern edge of Promise Creek. As Finn approached, he could see 3 horses tethered outside, confirming his fears. He slowed, drawing his revolver as he crept toward the building. The door stood partially open. From inside, he could hear voices: Jeb's distinctive drawl, another man's deeper tones, and then, clearly, Abigail's steady voice. "You won't find him here. He's gone." "Gone where, sweetheart?" Jeb's voice carried a dangerous edge. "'Cause I'm thinking he cares what happens to you, and that means he ain't gone far." Finn moved to one of the windows, carefully peering inside. Abigail stood near her desk at the front of the room, her posture rigid but her expression defiant. Jeb and one of his men, the heavyset one called Dunn, were facing her, while the third man seemed to be searching through the storage closet at the back of the room. "He left town last night," Abigail insisted. "After your visit to the mercantile, he packed his things and rode south." "Said something about Mexico." Jeb laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Nice try, madam, but we had this place watched all night. Nobody left, especially not our friend Wayland." Finn's mind raced. They must have scouts positioned around town, more men than the 3 they'd seen. Which meant the confrontation at the North Road had been a diversion all along. They'd intended to use Abigail as bait. He scanned the schoolroom, assessing distances and angles, planning his move. The third man emerged from the storage closet, shaking his head at Jeb. "Nothing here, boss." "Keep looking," Jeb ordered. "McAllister said he'd have it with him. Could be hidden anywhere." "Or he could have given it to someone for safekeeping," Dunn suggested, his gaze fixed menacingly on Abigail. "Someone he trusted." Jeb stepped closer to Abigail. "You know what we're looking for, don't you, Miss School Teacher?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," she replied, but Finn could see the flicker of fear in her eyes now. "I think you do." Jeb reached out, grabbing her arm roughly. "And I think it's time you stopped playing games." It was enough. Finn stepped back from the window, moved swiftly to the door, and kicked it fully open in one smooth motion. His revolver was aimed squarely at Jeb's chest as he entered. "Let her go," he commanded, his voice steady despite the fury coursing through him. Jeb's surprise lasted only a moment before his face split into a triumphant grin. Well, well, look who decided to join our little gathering. He didn't release Abigail's arm. Drop the gun, Wayland, or the lady gets hurt. You're not going to hurt anyone, Finn replied, taking another step into the room. Not anymore. I've been to the sheriff. Told him everything about Santa Fe, about McAllister, about the silver mine. It's over, Jeb. Jeb's grin faltered slightly. Doesn't matter what you told him. McAllister still wants what's his, and now we've got something you want. He yanked Abigail closer, using her as a shield. So I'll say it again, drop the gun. Behind him, Finn sensed movement. The third outlaw had circled around while they were talking, positioning himself behind Finn. A classic trap maneuver he'd seen McAllister's gang use before. 3 against 1 ain't great odds, Jeb continued, especially with the lady in the middle. You're right, Finn agreed, then smiled slightly. But it's not 3 against 1. The blast of a shotgun from outside the schoolhouse shattered the morning quiet. The window beside the third outlaw exploded inward, peppering him with glass and buckshot. He went down with a howl of pain. In the same instant, Finn dropped to one knee and fired, his bullet catching Dunn in the shoulder, spinning him away from Abigail. Jeb, momentarily shocked by the sudden turn of events, loosened his grip enough for Abigail to wrench herself free. She dove to the floor as Finn swung his revolver toward Jeb. It's over, Finn repeated. Sheriff Dawson has men surrounding this building. McAllister's not getting the mine, and you're not leaving Promise Creek except in chains or a coffin. Your choice. Jeb's hand hovered near his holster, his eyes darting between Finn, the wounded Dunn, and the shattered window where the barrel of a shotgun was now visible. McAllister won't stop, Jeb warned, slowly raising his hands. He'll send more men. He'll burn this whole town to the ground if that's what it takes. Let him try, Finn replied calmly. Some things are worth standing for. Sheriff Dawson entered the schoolhouse, his shotgun trained on Jeb. Behind him came several townsmen, including Dr. Harding, who immediately rushed to check on his daughter. Abigail, are you hurt? The doctor asked, helping her to her feet. I'm fine, Father, she assured him, though her voice shook slightly. Her eyes found Finn's across the room. Thanks to Mr. Wayland. Dawson and the other men quickly disarmed and secured the 3 outlaws. Dunn's shoulder wound was bleeding heavily, and the man who'd been hit by the shotgun blast was in even worse shape. But Dr. Harding confirmed neither injury was immediately life-threatening. Take them to the jail, Dawson ordered, and send word to the marshal in Tucson. Tell him we've got 3 of McAllister's gang in custody, and we need a proper escort to transfer them to territorial authorities. As the prisoners were led away, Abigail approached Finn, who had holstered his weapon and was staring out the shattered window, his expression troubled. You're thinking about what he said, she observed. About McAllister sending more men. Finn nodded. He will. Men like McAllister don't give up easily, especially when their pride is wounded. Then we'll be ready, she said simply. Promise Creek has faced challenges before. Not like this, Finn replied, turning to face her. I've seen what McAllister is capable of. I can't ask this town to take on my fight. You didn't ask. We chose. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes, and we'd choose it again. Dr. Harding cleared his throat as he approached them. Sheriff Dawson would like a word with you, Mr. Wayland. Something about the evidence you provided. Finn nodded, but before he could move away, Abigail caught his hand. It's going to be all right, she said softly. Whatever comes next. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Finn allowed himself to believe it might be true. The following weeks brought significant changes to Promise Creek and to Finn Wayland's life. True to Sheriff Dawson's word, a marshal from Tucson arrived to take custody of Jeb and his men. With them went Finn's signed confession, the silver watch, and the safe combination evidence against McAllister that the marshal promised would be put to good use. What surprised Finn most was that he wasn't arrested. The marshal, after a long private conversation with Sheriff Dawson, informed Finn that in exchange for his testimony against McAllister and the rest of the gang, the territorial governor was willing to grant him a conditional pardon for his past crimes. "Don't mistake this for charity," the marshal had warned. "You'll be expected in Tucson for the trial when the time comes, and if you ever step back across the line, there won't be a second chance." "I understand," Finn had replied, still stunned by this unexpected turn of events. "I won't waste the opportunity." Now, a month after that fateful confrontation at the schoolhouse, Finn stood on the boardwalk outside the livery stable, watching as Promise Creek prepared for its annual Founders' Day celebration. Colorful bunting decorated the storefronts, children ran excitedly through the streets, and the tantalizing smell of barbecue filled the air. "Quite a transformation," observed Mr. Peterson, joining him. "The town and the man." Finn smiled at the old stable master. "I don't know about transformations. I'm still the same man I was when I arrived." "No," Peterson disagreed, his weathered face crinkling with wisdom. "You're the man you were always meant to be, just took the right circumstances for him to emerge." Before Finn could respond, he spotted Abigail walking toward them, radiant in a yellow dress that caught the afternoon sunlight. In the weeks since the confrontation, they'd spent increasingly more time together, chaperoned walks after church, shared meals at the boarding house, long conversations on the schoolhouse steps after her teaching day was done. Each encounter had deepened his feelings for her, but also intensified his doubts. Did he have the right to court someone like Abigail Harding, educated, respected, from a good family given his past, and the uncertain future that still loomed? "Mr. Peterson, Mr. Wayland," she greeted them with a smile. "Are you gentlemen planning to attend the dance this evening?" "Too old for dancing," Peterson replied with a chuckle, "but I'll be there to judge the pie contest. Mrs. Fulton's apple crumb has won 3 years running, but I hear Mrs. Jenkins has a new peach recipe that might give her some competition." "And you, Mr. Wayland?" Abigail asked, her gaze meeting Finn's. "Will you be attending the dance?" Finn hesitated. "I hadn't given it much thought." Mr. Peterson made a show of checking his pocket watch. "Well, would you look at the time? I promised the widow Johnson I'd help set up the refreshment tables, if you'll excuse me." With a knowing wink at Finn, the old man shuffled away, leaving them alone. "Subtle as a stampede, that one," Finn remarked, drawing a laugh from Abigail. "He means well," she replied. "As do all the people of Promise Creek who keep finding reasons to leave us alone together. You've noticed that too? It would be hard not to. I believe Mrs. Fulton has invented at least 3 non-existent errands that required both our assistance." They shared a smile at this, the easy camaraderie between them a constant source of joy for Finn. But beneath it lay the conversation they had yet to have, the one about what came next. "About the dance," Abigail continued, a slight nervousness creeping into her voice. "I was hoping you might consider accompanying me as my escort." Finn looked down at his boots, then back at her earnest face. "Abigail, there's something I need to say." "If it's about your past, it's about the future," he interrupted gently. "McAllister is still out there. The trial could be months away. And even with the pardon, there are people who will always see me as the outlaw I was, not the man I'm trying to become. And how do you see yourself?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "I see someone trying to make amends, Someone who's been given a second chance he didn't expect and isn't sure he deserves. Well, I see a man of courage and principle, Abigail replied, stepping closer. A man who chose to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest path. A man who's earned the respect of this entire town. Her voice softened. A man I've come to care for deeply. Her words hung in the air between them, bold and unambiguous. In her eyes, Finn saw no doubt, no reservation, only clear certainty. I care for you too, he admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. More than I thought possible, but I need you to understand what loving me might mean. There will always be shadows from my past. There will always be risk. Life is risk, she countered. Loving anyone is a leap of faith, but some leaps are worth taking. She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. So I'll ask again, will you escort me to the dance tonight, Finn Wayland? The sound of his name on her lips, spoken with such tenderness, broke down the last of his resistance. It would be my honor, Miss Harding. Her smile was radiant. Wonderful. And perhaps afterwards we might continue this conversation about the future. I find I have quite a lot to say on the subject. I look forward to hearing every word, Finn replied, returning her smile. That evening, the town square was transformed by lantern light and music. Tables laden with food lined one side, while a makeshift dance floor occupied the center. Nearly everyone in Promise Creek had turned out for the celebration, dressed in their finest clothes and eager to enjoy the festivities. Finn arrived at Dr. Harding's house precisely at 7, wearing a new shirt Mrs. Fulton had insisted on purchasing for him, as a thank you for all your help around the boarding house. The doctor greeted him warmly, a far cry from the cautious reception Finn had anticipated after the events at the schoolhouse. "She'll be down in a moment, Doctor," Harding said, inviting Finn into the parlor. "And while we wait, I'd like to have a word with you man to man." "Of course, sir," Finn replied, bracing himself for the protective father speech he surely deserved. "My daughter has always had excellent judgment," the doctor began, surprising Finn. "Even as a child, she could see to the heart of people in a way that sometimes startled me. When her mother died, Abigail was only 12, but she became the strength that held our family together. Her faith in people, her capacity for forgiveness, these are qualities I've always admired in her." Finn nodded, uncertain where this was leading. "When you first came to Promise Creek, she told me there was more to you than met the eye," Dr. Harding continued. "She saw something in you that others missed, and it appears she was right." "Your daughter sees the best in people," Finn acknowledged. "Sometimes more than exists." "No," the doctor said firmly. "She sees potential. And in your case, she saw a good man buried beneath years of bad choices. Recent events have proven her correct." Before Finn could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Both men turned to see Abigail descending, wearing a dress of deep blue that emphasized the auburn highlights in her hair, which was arranged in an elegant style Finn had never seen before. "You look beautiful," he said simply when she joined them. "Thank you," she replied, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "You look rather handsome yourself." Dr. Harding cleared his throat. "Well, I suppose I should get my coat. Can't have the town doctor arriving late to the Founders' Day celebration." As they walked to the town square, Abigail's hand resting lightly on Finn's arm, an unusual sense of peace settled over him. The night air was cool and crisp, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky above. Promise Creek spread before them, alive with light and laughter and music. For the first time in years, Finn wasn't looking over his shoulder, wasn't planning his next move or escape route. He was simply present, walking beside a woman who somehow saw in him all the things he'd thought were lost forever. The celebration was in full swing when they arrived. Sheriff Dawson nodded to them from where he stood chatting with Mr. Calloway and his wife. Mrs. Fulton waved enthusiastically from the refreshment table, where she was arranging her famous apple pie for the contest. Even the children seemed happy to see Finn, several of the boys running up to show him the toy horses they'd received as Founders' Day gifts. "You've become quite popular," Abigail observed as they made their way through the crowd. "Not sure I'll ever get used to that," Finn admitted. "For so long, being noticed was the last thing I wanted." "Well, you're certainly noticed now, especially by the unmarried ladies of Promise Creek." She nodded toward a group of young women who were watching them with undisguised interest. "Miss Portman has asked me at least 3 times if you're courting anyone." "Has she?" Finn replied, amused by the hint of possessiveness in Abigail's tone. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I wasn't at liberty to discuss your personal affairs," Abigail said primly. Then, with a mischievous smile, she added, "But I may have implied that your affections were already engaged elsewhere." The band struck up a lively tune and couples began to move onto the dance floor. Finn hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. "I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer," he confessed. "Never had occasion to learn properly." "Then it's fortunate that I'm an excellent teacher," Abigail replied, leading him toward the dance floor. "And this is a simple waltz. Even you can't mess it up too badly." Under Abigail's patient guidance, Finn found his footing, and soon they were moving in rhythm with the other couples. He was acutely aware of her hand in his, of her waist beneath his other hand, of the scent of lavender that always seemed to surround her. "See," she said after a few minutes. "You're a natural." "I have a good partner," he replied. "Makes all the difference." As the music continued, Finn gradually relaxed, allowing himself to enjoy the moment without the constant vigilance that had been his companion for so long. Over Abigail's shoulder, he could see the people of Promise Creek, people who had every reason to reject him once they learned the truth, but who had instead embraced him as one of their own. When the dance ended, they made their way to the refreshment table where Mrs. Fulton handed them each a glass of punch. "You two make a handsome couple," she remarked with the directness of a woman who had earned the right to speak her mind. "About time Promise Creek had some new romance to gossip about." "Mrs. Fulton," Abigail protested, though her smile belied any real offense. "Oh, don't mind me," the widow replied with a wink. "Just an old woman who likes to see things work out the way they should." As the evening progressed, Finn and Abigail danced again, sampled the various pies Mrs. Jenkins' peach creation did indeed dethrone Mrs. Fulton's apple, causing quite a stir, and mingled with the townspeople. Throughout it all, Finn found himself increasingly at ease, as though the weight he'd carried for so long was gradually lifting. Later, as the celebration began to wind down and families with young children started to head home, Abigail suggested they take a walk to the small park at the edge of town. "It's a beautiful night," she said. "Seems a shame to waste it." The park was little more than a grassy area with a few benches and a small pond, but in the moonlight, it had a peaceful charm. They sat on a bench overlooking the water, the sounds of the celebration a distant murmur behind them. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Abigail began after a comfortable silence. "About the risks that come with your past." Finn nodded, the momentary reprieve from his concerns ending. "It's the reality. McAllister won't forgive what I've done. Even after the trial, there could be others, former gang members, people with grudges. My life will never be entirely free of that shadow." "I understand that," she said. "But everyone's life has shadows, Finn. Everyone carries regrets and fears about the future." "Not like mine," he argued gently. "Perhaps not, but the question isn't whether there will be challenges. It's whether we face them alone or together." She turned to look at him directly, her expression earnest in the silvery light. "You've carried the weight of your past for so long, you don't have to anymore. Not alone." Her words struck him with unexpected force, as though she had reached inside and touched the exact center of his pain. The weight of regret for the choices he'd made, the people he'd hurt, the years wasted had been his constant companion for so long that he barely remembered what it felt like to be free of it. "I don't know how to put it down," he admitted, his voice rougher than he intended. "I've tried. God knows I've tried. It starts with forgiveness," Abigail said softly. "Forgiving yourself for being human, for making mistakes, for choosing the wrong path before finding the right one. Some mistakes can't be undone. No, they can't, but they can be learned from. They can be the foundation for a better life, not the chain that binds you to a past you can't change." She reached for his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "You're not that man anymore, Finn. You've proven that time and again. To this town, to my father, to me. Now you need to prove it to yourself." Finn looked down at their joined hands, then up at the stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky. "When I came to Promise Creek, I was just looking for a place to hide, somewhere to catch my breath before moving on. I never expected." He paused, struggling to find the words. "To find a home," Abigail suggested. "To find you," Finn corrected her. "To find someone who could see past all the darkness to whatever small light might still be there." "The light was always there," she assured him. "It just needed the chance to shine again." In the gentle moonlight, with the woman who had somehow become the center of his world looking at him with such unwavering faith, Finn made a decision. He'd been running for so long from McAllister, from the law, from his own conscience. It was time to stand still, time to build rather than escape. "I can't promise the past won't catch up to us someday," he said. "But I can promise that as long as you'll have me, I'll spend every day trying to be the man you believe I am, the man I want to be." "That's all anyone can ask," Abigail replied, her smile luminous in the moonlight. "And it's more than enough for me." Finn reached out, gently touching her cheek. Then, with a courage born of newfound hope, he leaned forward and kissed her a kiss that carried all the promises he wanted to make, all the gratitude he couldn't express in words. When they finally parted, Abigail's eyes were shining. "I think," she said, a little breathlessly, "that this is the beginning of a rather wonderful story, Mr. Wayland." "I believe you're right, Miss Harding," he replied, smiling as he had not smiled in years. "And for once I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds." In the months that followed, Promise Creek watched as Finn Wayland and Abigail Harding's courtship blossomed into something the town's residents would later describe as a romance for the history books. They were seen walking together after church, sharing meals at Mrs. Fulton's boarding house, and working side by side at community events. When Finn began building a small house at the edge of town on land purchased from Mr. Peterson, few were surprised. The trial of Darius McAllister and his gang came in the spring of 1879. Finn traveled to Tucson with Sheriff Dawson, testifying for 3 grueling days about his years with the outlaw band. His testimony, along with evidence provided by other former gang members who had turned state's witness, was enough to see McAllister sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. When Finn returned to Promise Creek, he found the entire town waiting to welcome him home, a hero's welcome for a man who had once believed himself beyond redemption. And at the front of the crowd stood Abigail, her face alight with pride and love. That evening, beneath the same stars that had witnessed their first real conversation about the future, Finn asked Abigail to marry him. Her immediate and joyful acceptance was followed by what Mrs. Fulton later described as the most enthusiastic kiss ever witnessed on a public street in Promise Creek. They were married in the summer, a celebration that brought together not just the town but ranchers and settlers from miles around. Dr. Harding, with tears in his eyes, gave his daughter away to the reformed outlaw who had become one of Promise Creek's most respected citizens. Sheriff Dawson served as Finn's best man, a testament to the unlikely friendship that had formed between the lawman and the former outlaw. By the time autumn painted the surrounding hills with gold and crimson, the small house at the edge of town was finished. Abigail, having resigned her position at the schoolhouse, though she continued to tutor children who needed extra help, made it into a warm and inviting home. Finn, now a partner in Peterson's livery stable, had developed a reputation throughout the territory as a skilled horse trainer. On a crisp October evening, as they sat on their front porch watching the sunset paint the western sky, Abigail shared the news that they would be welcoming a child in the spring. Finn's joy was tempered only by a momentary return of his old fears. Would he know how to be a father? Would his past ever truly be left behind? As if reading his thoughts, Abigail took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "This child will know only the man you are now," she said softly. "The good man, the kind man, the man I fell in love with." "How do you always know exactly what I'm thinking?" Finn asked, pulling her closer. "Because I know you," she replied simply. "Better, perhaps, than you know yourself sometimes." "I'm still amazed by that," he admitted. "By all of this. There are mornings I wake up expecting to find it was all a dream, that I'm still on the run, still alone." "But you're not," Abigail reminded him. "You're home, and you're loved." In May of 1880, Elizabeth Rose Wayland entered the world, her first cries filling the small bedroom where Dr. Harding had delivered her into her father's waiting hands. With her mother's auburn hair and her father's blue eyes, she was immediately declared the most beautiful baby Promise Creek had ever seen, a claim that would be challenged only by the arrival of her brother Thomas 2 years later. As the years passed, Promise Creek grew and prospered. The railroad came in 1883, bringing new opportunities and new faces. Finn expanded the livery business, eventually opening a second location in the growing town of Copper Springs, 20 miles away. Abigail, once the children were in school, reopened a small private academy for students who needed specialized attention. They faced challenges, of course. A drought in '85 nearly devastated the surrounding ranches. A fire in '88 destroyed several buildings on the main street, including the original livery stable. And once, in the winter of 1890, a man from Finn's past appeared in town, seeking revenge for some long-ago grievance. But each challenge was met head-on, with the support of friends who had become family and the strength of a love that had transformed 2 lives. The weight of regret that Finn had carried for so long gradually faded, replaced by the gentle burden of responsibility for those he loved and the community that had embraced him. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Abigail presented Finn with a journal, his journal, kept during those early days in Promise Creek when he was still wrestling with his past and uncertain of his future. "I found it when we were clearing out the old storage chest," she explained as he turned the worn leather volume in his hands. "I thought you might like to see how far you've come." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Finn sat at his desk and opened the journal. His younger self stared back at him from the pages, angry, afraid, convinced that happiness was something meant for other people. On the final page, in an entry dated the night before the confrontation at the schoolhouse, he had written, "Tomorrow I face McAllister's men. I don't know what will happen, but I know I'm tired of running, tired of carrying this weight. If I die, at least it will be standing for something, protecting people who have shown me kindness I never deserved. And if by some miracle I survive, perhaps I can finally begin to make amends for the man I've been. Beneath this entry, in Abigail's familiar handwriting, were words she must have added before giving him the journal. You have made those amends 1,000 times over. In the lives you've touched, the community you've helped build, the family we've created together. The weight you carried for so long has been transformed into the foundation of a life filled with love and purpose. And I have been blessed beyond measure to walk this path with you. Forever yours, Abigail. Finn closed the journal, tears blurring his vision. Through the window, he could see the lights of Promise Creek spread out below their hillside home, the town that had given him a second chance, that had become the backdrop for a life he'd never dared to imagine. In the bedroom, he could hear Abigail moving about, preparing for sleep. His wife, the woman who had seen possibility where others saw only danger, the woman who had taught him that regret didn't have to be a life sentence. You don't have to carry it anymore, she had told him that night by the pond, 20 years ago. And gradually, day by day, year by year, he had learned to put it down, not forgotten, never that, but transformed, redeemed, the dark soil from which a good life had somehow grown. As Finn Wayland rose to join his wife, he sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had guided his steps to Promise Creek all those years ago. For a man who had once believed himself beyond salvation, he had found not just forgiveness, but a kind of grace he could never have imagined. And in that grace, he had finally found peace.